Thank you for joining me on part 2 of our 2-part episode for customizing and creating a shirt. This is going to take off right from where part 1 finished. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I would recommend doing so. We cover basically everything for the first half of the project, from image design, both tracing an image if you have one from somewhere like Google, adding custom colors to a traced image, preparing everything for a good clean print, or cut if you are going the vinyl route, with cleaning up images and things of that nature to get a good quality product. We also got in the case of this project, the car for the project cut out and ready to go in part 1. And we're going to continue part 2 with the cutting of the HTV for our text. And then we'll do all of the pressing, both of the colored printed image as well as the HTV to complete the final shirt. So I'll put a link up for part 1 in case you missed that. Otherwise, enjoy part 2, and hopefully you can learn something useful that will benefit you moving forward. All right, continuing forward, all I've done is switch from the send screen back to the design screen here. That's all I've done so far. Let's get this guy out of the way. We want to switch our page size because this is our 8.5 by 11 sheet that we used for the car print. This time we're going to be using a roll. You could do it like a 12 by 12 sheet or a 12 by 10 or whatever you're doing. But I'm doing it off of a roll of HTV from HTVront on Amazon. So I'm going to switch this to no cutting mat. I'm going to switch my media size to 12 by 12. I could do longer because it is a roll. I've got, I think, about 35 feet left. So I could increase this length if I wanted, or height. But I'm keeping it within 12 inches, so it doesn't ultimately make much difference. So, move this over. This is one of those times I can change the color here so I can see where my white text is going. You can do this one of a couple ways. I don't like a lot of waste. Let me undo real quick. Switch this. You can move all of this together like so. Cut it like this. And then when you weed all of this, what's now gray, you'll be left with the letters and the proper spacing for the car in the middle. But it means you're wasting all of this material. So you can move it this way and have some extra waste. I prefer not to waste when I can help it. I always feel bad throwing things away anyway. Plus that waste starts to add up money-wise as well. That a square foot of the vinyl I'm using, I think, is about $1. I should be throwing away like 2/3 of that. And if you do this on every project, that like 60 cents of waste will very quickly pile up. So you can do it this way and either cut strategically to have less waste and you'll have like scrap pieces you could use later. Or you can move them closer together and eyeball the layout around the car later. So it kind of depends on you, your comfort level, your willingness to waste material, and how you want to approach it. I'm thinking I'm going to go this way and do it manually. I'll probably regret it, but I think I'm going to do it this way anyway. But generally, I like doing it so it's down here. It's very easy to just set it down and be done. But I think today I'm going to do it this way. And if it goes totally sideways, I can always come back and cut it the other way. But I'm hoping to do it this way and to save some material. So I'm going to get it not right at the top, because every once in a while I get a weird little cut if I get it right on the edge, but we'll get it relatively close. I'll get this relatively close, but I want enough room that I can run my scissors in between without any issues, so I can cut my two lines of text apart from one another. And then I'm going to make a box. You don't have to do this part, but I will. Put a little box around here. And this is just so that I have a guide for weeding and cutting that I can cut off across here. And then I'll just weed off this little rectangle around the font. And now we talked about the fact the car wasn't mirrored, but this needs to be. So you want to select all of this. And if you happen to forget and you go to send, and you choose your material, which is an HTV. Actually, I have it down here at the bottom. I have mine specifically done. Heat transfer HTVront. If I choose to send this, it'll tell you it often needs to be mirrored. Don't do the send mirrored. Sometimes you get weird issues where it'll flip like maybe the top line of text and not the bottom, so half of your cut won't be usable. I don't want to do send as is though, because I don't have it set up on the machine yet, so I'm going to cancel this, and I need to mirror it anyway. So what you want to do is, the easiest way is just to select what needs to be mirrored, which in this case is everything. Hit your right click and flip horizontally, and that will just turn everything backwards. I've got a little more waste over here from this rectangle now that it's been flipped than I'd like, so I'll move it over just a touch. It looks like my C is now just off the page, so we need to move it, at least that line, if not everything, over just a bit. So make sure everything is inside our cuttable area. Looks good. I've got my rectangle there. And if we go to send and take a peek, we can see that line is going to be cut here. Obviously, it won't cut off the mat, so that's all grayed out. All of our font now fits the page, and it looks good. I hate that the cut edge is such a fat line. That cut is so much cleaner and easier to see. So sometimes if I'm just trying to double check like small details like the center of this A, I might switch it to cut just because this is much more clear. But they'll, being text, they're going to have the same effect, and you can see that here. It's fuzzy looking, but it is showing all those centerpieces cut. So either way for this project will work. I'm going to leave it as cut just because that's very clear. I switch over, load up the machine, get that HTV cut, and go from there. Okay, this time I'm going with a roll of vinyl. I've got a decent amount of it here. I'll peel my tape off. And unlike most rolls, or at least most of the rolls I do, because I do mostly permanent vinyl, is usually you would load it this way and run it onto your machine. But at least this specific product, we want the other way around. So I want to do the roll what looks like to me upside down. So we're cutting the kind of underside from the direction that it's been rolled. And again, I'm on a roll, so this position is too wide. I'm going to unlock that and move it over a slot and lock it back down. That way when I push this into place, it's grabbing, I think you can see me, kind of. Yeah, it's going to grab the edge of the vinyl right here. That way we don't have any shifting while it's trying to cut. Get that pulled into place. I always like to, I'll take you back over here for just a second. I always like to do a quick double check because I do switch back and forth doing stickers and things. I often have the mat enabled. So I'll often double check that I have cutting mat disabled and we don't see it drawn here around the piece. So I just like to double check, especially since the little cutoff margin looks like the mat down here, when in reality that's because it thinks I have a 12-inch by 12-inch sheet and it can't cut the bottom of a sheet because it can't grab it anymore. So just a quick double check just to make sure we don't waste out of user error. So I always do a quick final double check before I send this to the machine. If it'll cooperate. There we go. And we will send that. Oh. And as a reminder, it pops up that error because I have my heat transfer vinyl, which is usually mirrored. People always like to ask, so I'll show you here. I'm at blade depth 2, force of 10. This one we'll keep it at speed 5, just kind of in the middle. And running this at 1 pass. But it has that reminder, have you mirrored? We've mirrored it, so we don't want to do send mirrored or it will flip it back the other way. So we want to send as is since we've already got our design mirrored right there. So send as is, and that will kick it over to the cutter. Except for I misclicked. Oh, I did not misclick on my other screen. I forgot I'm on a dual screen, so the error goes over here. It's warning us that the line right here goes outside of the page, so only part of it will be cut. Do we want to continue? So I have an error on my other page here. So yeah, it says design is overlapping the cut border. Do you want to continue? Yes. And that'll get ourselves cut here. I'll move you in closer for those who are curious. Let that finish doing its thing. We'll be right back. It's finished cutting. And in the right lighting, if you can get the focus there, you can see the cuts are all made. So I like to use the cutter on the back with this. Since most of the length is being used, I'll just make a nice straight clean cut so the roll is easy to use next time. So I'm going to feed this manually out the back. I'm going to find the end of my design. I won't just past it. So I'm just getting the end of it roughly to the end of the machine. I'll drop my little lock. And on this side, drop the little lock. So I can lock down the base. And then we've got our little knife blade here. A lot of people don't seem to realize this exists. So I've got it lined up. The edge of my design actually shifted just a bit. It's right about here at my fingernail. So I'm going to move it just a little bit closer to the machine so I'm not wasting that little bit extra. It's not a lot, but if we can save, we might as well. So pull that back just a hair. Yeah, it's enough. It's enough to make sure it's a good cut. Grab our little blade here. And just slide it across so we have a nice cut. And then we can eject the rest of our material. Perfect. All right, I'll get this guy weeded and we'll continue from there. All right, time for the heat pressing portion. So the first thing you're going to want to do is look at your specific product or materials directions. For the 3G Jet Opaque, they have it clearly printed out for you here, very clear and easy to see. All the details on how to prep, how to do the printing and the cutting. It goes on to talk about how to lay it out on the heat press. And then very clearly we're doing 30 seconds at 350 degrees Fahrenheit with heavy pressure. So they make that very clear. And same with the HTVront that I use. Its boxes over here. Oh, there we go. They make it very clear. Heat press transfer. Set heat press to 302 to 320. I found 315 works very well for me. Preheat the garment, which we'll do in a second. Use a Teflon sheet. And then medium pressure on this for 10 to 15 seconds. I usually do 15 seconds. And then a cold peel application on this. I put it away, but the 3G Opaque says cool peel on that. You can do it cold as well. This one specifies cold, and cold is definitely important. I've done this one kind of lukewarm, and it fights with you. So as the directions are very clear, do it cold. So we're doing two different materials. Again, the Tigus is right here. The font, which I have weeded and cut them apart. They're now stuck together again. Ready to go. So this is the sticky side. That way we can stick it face down onto the shirt, and it is facing the right direction once it's pressed. So I have both of those cut, ready to go. And I've got the 3G Jet Opaque just sitting on top of the Cameo. They have different instructions. 350 degrees, 30 seconds. For my situation and my testing, 315 for about 15 seconds. So this needs more heat and more time. Meaning I'm going to heat and press this one first because it is designed to be at 350. This is designed to be under 320. So when I press this, I don't want this to come later and press again on top of this at 350 degrees. So we're going to press this at 350, lower the temp of the machine to my 315 and press this. This can obviously handle 315. This may or may not handle 350. So I've got my machine set. It is preheated to 350. And I think it'll let me see. I've got it set for 30 seconds, just as the instructions told us to do so. So at 350, it's actually saying at 352 in the room at the moment. It's counting up. Did I bump it by mistake? Let's double check. Nope, it's at 350. It's where it's set. It's just a little warmer than that. Once we know it's preheated to 350 now. Okay, So that is heated and ready to go. A couple things we're going to do here. Let me get you in a position where we can see what's happening. The zoom on this camera is pretty intense, so I got to get pretty far away here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, which it mentioned on both packaging, but we saw it on the HTVront box versus the paper printout, is we want to do a pre-press of our shirt. It ensures we get the wrinkles out and any moisture that might be in the shirt. If you happen to have washed it before, generally it's not recommended, but I've done shirts that I've owned for a while, so they've been washed a handful of times. It gets any moisture out, or if you're in a more humid area, any humidity that's got moisture into your fabrics, you want to make sure that's out so you don't get any kind of bubbling in your materials, because you're going to get steam when that moisture is heated. So we'll just do a few seconds. It's at 350, so I don't need to do a crazy long time. 5 to 7 seconds usually is more than enough. That was right at 6 seconds. So now I've got it wrinkle-free. I think I'm in the frame, more or less. I mean, you can't tell really, but the section we'll be pressing is now wrinkle-free. And then what I like to do, despite taking all the wrinkles out, is actually fold the shirt in half. And we're going to press it and give ourselves a center line on the shirt so we can get things kind of centered more effectively. So I'm lining up the sleeves corner to corner. Make sure the little armpit section lines up. That way it's actually folded in half and not just folded roughly in the middle. I find if I pull this out and line up my shirt, I can then just put the foam piece back in a little easier. So I have it loaded like this. The shirt's just on the foam, and I can slide the whole thing back in. So fold it right across the middle. Don't bang your knuckles on it because it's 350 degrees. So that's part of why I pull the foam out. It works like a pull-out type heat press, despite it not having a lower platen that pulls out. Make sure we're still lined up nicely. Our little armpits are lined up pretty well. So I want my middle to actually be the middle and not just vaguely close. That looks good. We'll give that just a couple seconds. It's on heavy pressure, and now it's folded in half, so it's extra tight. All right, and that'll give us just a faint center line. I don't know if that'll show. That should show up in the video. Yeah, sure. You can see there's got a nice center line, so when this is laid down, we can tell roughly where the middle of our pattern is compared to the middle of the shirt. And it's right in line with the tag of the shirt, which makes sense. Okay, so we're doing the car first at the 350. So I'm going to get my shirt lined up. And because we're having, where are we in the frame here? Sorry. If we're doing text, car, text, I want, usually the guide is about your hand width below the collar of the shirt. My hand width is about 3.5 inches. I usually like 3.5 to 4 inches of space. And that's going to be before the top of your design, which for this specific design, the top is the I'm not old. This is the top line, but we're doing the car first. So we need the 3.5 to 4 inches of space before this, about a 3/4 inch gap below this, and then the car. So we want close to 7 inches below this collar. We're going to have 3.5, our text about 1 inch, and then our car to start about here. So we want to give ourselves about 7 inches since we're doing the car first. So we want to get this. This will probably be out of the frame for me. I apologize. I just don't have enough room in this room at the moment. So I'm just going to get my shirt laid out flat. I'm going to measure out my 7 inches. And I'm doing, let me see if I can get this down. You're probably going to see all my mess. But that's all right. I'll live through it. Doing some reorganizing and my trash piles back here and everything else. So I'm just going to measure down. I would usually go about 4 inches, which is here. You can even lay it down. If you know you want your font to go here, right at 4 inches, we can just kind of set that. It's sticky, so it'll tack in place. And then have our car below that. We can decide how much space we want. And if I did 7 inches, that looks really far to me. So I'm glad I measured and lined these up because I don't think I would have liked that look. So I'm going to go closer to 6 inches. Though I've got about 1 inch gap between the font and the car. I don't want to go too low or the image will be on his stomach, and that's no good either. So I'm going to put it about 6 inches below. So now that I know where I want it, I'm going to move that off to the side. I apologize, I bumped the record button as I was repositioning us. There we go. Now that I've got measured out where I want it, I can get my shirt back on, slide him into place, get this lined up so it's pretty square to my machine. I still have that center line so I can see where the center is, but I'm kind of cockeyed. And that can mess with you when you're lining things up, even though you've got a central reference. So we'll get that nice and flat. Again, watch the back corners here are pretty low. You don't want to bump your knuckles. I got real close once. That was close enough for me. All right, that looks pretty good. I want to go about 6 inches down now is the plan. So we can lay this here. Be careful if you use a tape measure like this. It's got the little metal end on it. If it sits here for a while, that metal end will get hot. So just a heads up, I did grab it once, a little warmer than expected. It's not recommended. So I'm just going to hold this, doesn't move too much. Get my image right about where I want it. Just trying to get it so we're fairly square and looking good. Cars are a little weird because depending on your angle, which wheels line up is kind of dependent on the background and the terrain that you're on. So on a shirt where it's just a car, you have to just kind of eyeball it to what you think will look best. I'm kind of going a middle ground, so it's kind of a between the front and the far left tire are kind of lined up. So I'm going to go about there, I think. I'm going to grab my Teflon sheet. If you're smart, unlike me, and you have good magnets, you can magnetize it on the edge right here of your top platen. And then you don't have to do this part, you just bring your top down. I'm going to get this lined up. Make sure it covers the whole design. Give this 30 seconds. I won't bore you through the 30-second wait though. Well, it's counting down 30 seconds. I'll be right back. All right. I'll pull this off, but we don't want to, I just want to pull it away so there's a little more distance from the heat. This is a cool peel, not cold. Still kind of warm-ish. I usually just give it like a gentle jiggle and just kind of wait till it wants to kind of pull off by itself, and then it's sat long enough. If you want to speed up the process, you can pull it off of the heat entirely, just so it's not right next to a 350-degree piece of metal. But we can see it's sitting here. I've pulled it back. You can see where the color changes. This part is loose. This part is still all secured. So I just kind of give it a jiggle and see if it wants to come by itself. And once it feels like it kind of wants to give, generally I have found a nice, quick, swift pull is best. So let me set you down so I can do that and not have any issues. I don't know if you want to see this or not. I'm trying. My room is too small. There we go. Give this a nice quick, swift pull. Tuck this out of the way. Over there is fine for now. And so currently, where are we? We've got our car. Sorry for the poor lighting. The lamp is behind the phone. But we've got our car on the shirt, so we're looking good so far. Now we need to change our temp. So on my machine, I mean, obviously going to be different from machine to machine, but I've got OK. Bring my temp down. We decided 315 is what works best from my testing previously. Because it's 305 to 320 for 10 to 15 seconds, and for me 15 has been pretty good. And OK, so we gotta let that cool. I know it's preheated. We'll let that cool back down for a minute. It'll take a little longer to cool down, so I'll stop the video. Once that's back to the 315, we'll continue with our font portion. Alright, so our machine is now set to 315. It's currently sitting at 318. It's popping back and forth. We've got our first line of text here. Obviously, make sure you're not trying to set it the wrong way. It is sticky, so it will stick to the shirt a bit. And I can still see that like seam or that fold that I made. It's a lot harder to see now that I've pressed it. And then what I usually do, I did it off camera while I was waiting. But I kind of loosely fold, where are we in the screen? Loosely fold my design in half so I can tell where the midpoint is, which looks like it's basically right in the middle of the, right in the middle of the O. So I'm going to set that on that little crease line that we made That way we know it's in the middle of the shirt. And I want about 3/4 of an inch or so between the car and the font. That's just shy of 3/4. That's pretty good. I make sure that we're not only in the middle, but also square on the shirt, which is kind of hard to tell because the top of the car has a curve to it. So I'm just trying to see how parallel I am to the sides with the edges of my vinyl, as well as the top line with the top or the back of the platen here. And that looks pretty good. The O is right about in the center. It looks pretty square. I'm going to press that down. It's getting pretty warm sitting under the heat there, so it shouldn't burn you, but don't get caught off guard. Same thing with the next one. Kind of fold it loosely in half. Don't fold it in half, because you'll crease your vinyl, but get it close enough. You can tell it's right between the C and the L here on the top portion. So it looks like the middle point is right about here. So I'm going to again line that up with the little fold line that we made earlier. Trying to get it looking in a position that we like it. I think that's just a hair uphill, so let's twist that just a little. Right between the C and the L. Get my measuring tape here and get in the same ballpark of distance. And that is just a hair under 3/4. That spacing looks pretty good. I like to do a final look at, that's not a word. Kind of final look over everything and just make sure everything looks good, the spacing, the angles, before I make a fairly permanent mistake. I'm going to pull this just a smidge further forward so that way I'm not getting my collar, because that will give you an inconsistent pressure because you'll have a tighter fit at the top there. So push that guy down, make sure he's pushed down. Everything looks pretty good to me. So we'll grab our sheet, cover our entire design. Give it a good press. Again, this one's at 15 seconds, so only 10 left. We'll let this one run since that's not very long. Plus I get my camera set back up. There we go. 3 seconds. Perfect. Give that a pull. That off of there. And now I have to get this out from under the heat, especially now that the printed portion has been heated twice. I don't really want it to just sit under the heat. And then because this is a cold peel, I usually give it just a light kind of jiggle in the air, just to help the air get around it and cool it down a little bit. Just so I'm not waiting forever. It doesn't take very long. You can do this vinyl kind of cool. I wouldn't say warm. Warm did not work. Granted, it didn't like ruin it. It just was not gonna come off. We'll give that just a moment of some air here. Move my tape measure out of the way so I can lay this on the desk. That way we can give it a nice peel. You can just kind of check it with your hand, see how it feels. I'm guessing it's about 80 degrees, give or take, right now. So still a little warmer than I'd like it to be. But let me pan up a little bit here. See the general idea. And the same thing as before, I'll usually kind of roll this back and see how well it comes off of the letters. And it looks like it's coming off okay. So let me see if I can get it down to an angle where you can possibly see. Usually I put it on top of the heat press, but the heat press is really hot right now. So the heat press is not a good angle for you to view, because I will melt my little tripod. Okay. So give this kind of a, be confident but not too fast. I have found that if you delay a lot, you'll get like little ripples in it, because each time you pause, you'll leave like a little line. So you do want to be kind of consistent with your speed in the removal. But it's not super critical. Just don't go, stop kind of thing, or you'll get little lines. Move down to this one. Same thing, kind of a confident pull. I don't rip it off, but don't try to go too slow. There we go. Make sure everything looks okay. looks pretty good to me. So I get it back on, my machine comes with that little foam pad, so I get it back on the foam pad, make sure my image is fully on there, give it one final press with all the plastics and stuff removed, all the liner sheets. Get the sleeve out from the back. That looks good. And then usually I'll turn, I did the other presses this direction, I'll turn it this way. It's a minor detail, but there's a grain in the Teflon sheet. And if I go the same way every time, you get kind of a striped look to the vinyl, if that makes sense. Almost like you would like a wood grain, just very minor. So if I go both directions, you get more of a grid, and it gives kind of the effect that you would see on a screen print. Because you get like a very same kind of pattern you would get on like a carbon fiber, where you get like a real fine grid. Air that out for just a second and see if that grid shows up in the photos or the video. All right, I'm not trying to peel anything, so it's going to be cold. Yeah, I can kind of see it. I don't know if it'll show up in the video or not, but you can see there's kind of, if it'll focus, be good to me, there it goes. You can see it in the lighter color pretty well. There's like a little grid, as where before it was basically only vertical stripes. It looks more, I don't know, kind of professional and finished to me. But here is it all zoomed in. Is that hair under the HTV? No, it was on top, perfect. I didn't lint roll this one, I meant to. It's sitting right here next to my press. Lint roll your shirts. Don't regret it. Luckily that one was not under the vinyl, or I would be sad. So yeah, make sure to lint roll your shirt. I just was not, I'm focused on the video and other things. I wasn't in the zone. So, but overall that's looking real nice. There's a little bit of that same texture, not as much because it had the plastic over it, versus this, which was just the raw print. So you can definitely see the texture in that. And then again, the vinyl on the bottom. There's a little bit of it. I can't see it in the video. Maybe you can. But there's a little bit of it I can see in reality, where it has this effect, but just not quite as aggressive. So that's the end look. And then we can clean up our mess, and then we're all finished. All right, and if you made it this far, hopefully you learned something new and enjoyed the overall process. It was a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I didn't want to skip any of the details, just speed up the process a little bit. And then we'll just take just a moment to see the final product, some of the detail and that texture that I had talked about. The light in the bathroom is pretty bright, which is where I have it hanging right now. So it's caught a little bit of the shine, but it doesn't actually shine. It looks just like that. So I appreciate everyone who stuck around. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I appreciate all the likes and subscribes that are coming through. This channel is getting a lot more attention and appreciation than I had anticipated. And it means a lot that everyone is benefiting and then acknowledging and stating their appreciation. That seeing so many satisfied people, people that went from having so much trouble with their machine to now getting successful projects cut and printed. It's been very rewarding. So I'm glad that everyone is benefiting. I'm glad you stuck through the video with me, and we will see you in the next one.